Is the 4-year cycle dead? Alam mo, marami mga analysts and mga traders are now saying that the Bitcoin 4-year cycle is dead, given what happened in the last Bitcoin cycle, which did not match what happened in the previous Bitcoin cycles. So sa video na to, pag-uusapan natin ngayon if the 4-year cycle is dead, and we're gonna take a look at some charts to be able to determine what we can expect from Bitcoin moving forward to the next Bitcoin halving in 2028 and beyond. So, unang-una tignan natin yung 50-week moving average. Ayan, pag makita mo yung ating 50-week moving average, makikita mo dito that when Bitcoin goes below the 50-week moving average, it signals the start of the bear market. And as soon as it crosses above the 50-week moving average, it is in the bull market or the bull cycle. So, ang linaw dito, in the last cycle, we were in the bull cycle or the bull market when it was above the 50-week moving average, and as soon as it crossed convincingly below the 50-week moving average, then we went into the bear market in 2022. Tapos noon, as soon as it actually recovered past the 50-week moving average around February, we went back up to the bull market. And the bull market was in play up until about the first week of November to when it collapsed below the 50-week moving average. And we went all the way past it and broke the 50-week moving average support of $102,000 per Bitcoin, and even broke the $100,000 psychological support of Bitcoin to drop it down to around $80,000 per Bitcoin. And from there, today, we are at around $90,000 to $91,000 per Bitcoin as of the making of this video, which is way below the 50-week moving average, pretty much telling me that we are in the bear market. So what can we expect moving forward? Will Bitcoin's price recover? Can we still get back into the bull market? Or are we gonna be bearish na from now until the entire 2026? So tignan natin ngayon yung Bitcoin monthly return chart. Now, if you look at the Bitcoin monthly return chart, makikita mo dito that when October and November are negative or red, December normally turns out to be red. That happened in the 2018 cycle. You will also notice that whenever November is negative or red, December ends up being red most of the time. But right now, Bitcoin's in the green with a plus 2.4% return on Bitcoin. But will it hold for the month of December or not? There's a big possibility it may not hold or remain flat for the rest of December. But the good news is if we get 2 Decembers that are negative 2 years in a row, normally the January will see a significant return. That happened in the 2018-2019 year where 2020 gave a 30% return, and in 2021-2022, by 2023, it gave a 40% return. So if we get 2 negative Decembers, we could possibly expect a 15 to 20% return on Bitcoin for the month of January. But that's just one chart, and that doesn't guarantee it will actually happen. Kasi nga, pag tinignan mo, based on the 50-week moving average, it looks like we're gonna stay below the 50-week moving average moving forward to 2026. Now, let's take a look at the last cycle and why people are now saying that the Bitcoin cycle is dead, and how this last cycle was different from the previous cycles of Bitcoin. Normally kasi, the Bitcoin all-time high will happen roughly from 12 to 18 months after the halving. And in the previous cycle, that did not happen. What happened in the previous cycle was, although it did hit an all-time high 18 months after the halving around November of 2021, it did crash into the bear market in 2022, only to recover and start the bull run in 2023 prematurely, because normally the bull run does not start until after the halving. But in this case, it started around March 2023 and continued to create a new all-time high at around $74,000 per Bitcoin before the next halving, which happened in around April 20 of 2024. So that was the main difference. And the reason why this is unusual is because normally you won't see a new all-time high until after the halving. And in this case, a new all-time high was created before the halving, although it was not that much higher than the previous all-time high of $67,000 per Bitcoin. It just went up to about $74,000 per Bitcoin, but nonetheless, it was still a new all-time high. And after the halving, it did go up to create a new all-time high at $109,000 per Bitcoin, back down again to the 50 50-week moving average, and all the way up again to create a new all-time high last October at about $126,000 per Bitcoin. And after that, that's when we saw the market correct and go below the 50-week moving average. So now people are wondering, what was the difference in the last cycle? In the last cycle, the main difference was this. There was the introduction of the ETFs. Ngayon yung pumasok na yung mga Bitcoin ETFs na yan, or yung mga exchange-traded funds that were being sold by the biggest asset managers in the United States. That was the game changer. And the ETFs created a significant inflow into Bitcoin, which positively affected the price. Kasi the ETFs allowed a lot more people to be able to have access to Bitcoin without actually having to buy the Bitcoin, and making it easier to be able to have exposure in Bitcoin. And if you look at this green line, makikita mo dito that that's the date when the ETFs were introduced, around January 10. And what happened? It created this massive pump all the way to a new all-time high as people started to flow into Bitcoin through the ETFs. And you couple that with the halving that happened around April, then you saw a new all-time high for Bitcoin, driving the price up eventually to $126,000 per Bitcoin. And if you actually look at the inflow and outflow of the ETFs and compare to the Bitcoin price, makikita mo dito that the Bitcoin price has a direct correlation to the inflow of ETFs. As you can see from this chart, every time there's an inflow of ETFs into Bitcoin, the price moves up. And every time that it has an outflow, or if the money is flowing out of Bitcoin, the price goes down. And it did that since the inception of the ETFs. And this is what drove the price of Bitcoin to where it's at today. As you guys can see here, the higher the inflow, the higher the price gets. And the higher the outflow, the lower the price drops. And over the last couple of months, you'll see that there is more outflow for Bitcoin ETFs than there are inflows, as a lot of these investors are actually cashing out and taking profit. Then you also add to that yung global adoption of Bitcoin, because you also have the national treasuries buying Bitcoin, including countries like El Salvador and other countries that also mine Bitcoin. This has driven the adoption and the demand for Bitcoin, which was what drove this market to its new all-time high. But what happened to Bitcoin? Why didn't we see this blow off top that everyone, including myself, was expecting? And I think that's because of the institutions. The institutions have changed the game. Before January 10, 2024, most of the people in Bitcoin, if not all, were retail traders and investors. The retail market has a tendency to have mania stages where they will have a blow off top. In this case, it didn't have that because institutions tend to move in ranges, and because they do take profit, it actually is the one that limits the volatility. And that's one of the reasons why we didn't see that blow off top in this cycle. So where can we expect Bitcoin moving forward now that we're in the bear market? To try to get an idea of where we think this is going to go, let's now plot the last cycle to this cycle and see where we can expect Bitcoin in 2028 and beyond. So let's just draw this cycle just to get an idea of where we think Bitcoin is going to be. So we basically created a plot starting from the 2020 halving, charting where the all-time high hit, all the way to the next halving in 2024. And now we're going to move this chart towards about the same time frame and see where we can expect Bitcoin. Pag makita mo dito right now, we can expect Bitcoin to drop all the way to the last all-time high in the last cycle of about $74,000 per Bitcoin. And that's roughly around the fourth quarter of 2026. And then after that, we could possibly see a recovery of Bitcoin coming up around 2027 and even hit a new all-time high possibly around January 2028. And that new all-time high could be roughly around $133,000 per Bitcoin. And then from there, the halving will happen around April 2028. And if the patterns hold, we could see Bitcoin hitting a high of $186,000 per Bitcoin around September of 2029. Then it could possibly correct again. And then repeat the entire cycle all over again. So is the Bitcoin cycle dead? I don't think so. Pero ang tingin ko nangyari dito ay na-minimize yung effect ng halving compared to the past because of the introduction of the ETFs. What I just showed you is a possible scenario of where this can go given that everything is status quo. We still have the ETFs, we still have the halving, and nation states are continually including Bitcoin in their treasuries, and we still have companies that also include Bitcoin in their treasuries. This does not take into account the possibility and the likelihood that there will be more nation states and corporate treasuries that are going to add Bitcoin as their reserve asset. And we haven't factored in the possible increase in the accumulation of Bitcoin through the ETFs. So as traders, how can you make money given this market cycle? In any market, there's always the opportunity to make money because of leverage. Kasi with leverage, you can trade long or you can trade short. Ibig sabihin, you can trade when the price is going up and you can also trade and make money when the price is going down. So titignan natin ngayon kung ano ba yung range kung saan maglalaro ang Bitcoin for the entire 2026 and what range you should be trading in this market. So pag tinignan natin dito, you can draw a resistance line at around $103,000 per Bitcoin. Tapos, on the support line naman here, we can safely assume the support line at around $74,000 per Bitcoin, which was last cycle's all-time high. So pag tinignan mo itong resistance at support line mo dito, makikita mo that for 2026, you can expect Bitcoin to play around this level from $74,000 per Bitcoin all the way up to about $103,000 per Bitcoin. And there's an opportunity for day traders to make money when the price of Bitcoin fluctuates up or down within this range. Ngayon, tignan naman natin Bitcoin on the 4-hour chart to be able to determine how we can trade Bitcoin up to 2026. For this, gagamitin natin ngayon yung Fibonacci retracement tool natin. So, draw natin yung retracement tool from this swing high down to the swing low. At pag makita mo dito, ayan, that Bitcoin has dropped all the way to $80,000 and then nag-recover siya going back up to the 38.2% resistance. Tapos nauntog siya dito at bumaba siya to 23% and back to 38% ulit. Tapos nauntog na naman siya recently. From 94,000, bumaba na naman to where we're at today at about $90,000 per Bitcoin. At yan, makikita mo dito that it created a classic double top pattern which caused the Bitcoin price to correct back down to about $90,000 per Bitcoin. So, what we need to see right now para makita natin kung aakyat ulit ang Bitcoin price, kailangan niya ma-break itong golden pocket natin dito between 50 to 61.8%. And it has to break convincingly above that, which is around $102,000 per Bitcoin. But as long as it doesn't break above that, you can expect the price in that range of about $103,000 per Bitcoin all the way down to about $74,000 per Bitcoin. At pag tinignan mo nga itong ating 4-hour chart, makikita mo nga dito that it's forming a bearish wedge. So from this point, you could expect it to go up again, and then down again, up again, and then correct in the downside from this point onwards. So basically, my trading strategy will now be just to be able to play around that range of about $74,000 per Bitcoin all the way to a high of $103,000 per Bitcoin, taking profit along the way between that range and prepare myself for the next bull cycle. Kayo, ano tingin nyo? Do you believe the 4-year cycle's dead? And what do you think will happen in 2026, 2027, and moving forward to 2028? Sulat nyo lahat ng comments sa comment section sa ibaba. And if you like this kind of content, to subscribe to this YouTube channel where I talk everything about trading, crypto, and investing. Salamat sa inyo lahat. Ito si Christian. Magkita tayo muli.